Oh, shit, are you here? That'd be right. Bloody hell. God, I'm caught in the act. Well, thought we might as well address the whole pollen patty saga. We've got about 50 hives that we did some splits on, and they were just sort of suffering a bit where they were because the jolly nectar flow stopped and it started raining its arse off. So they're doing it a bit tough. So we brought them back to the farm, and I thought, well, it'll be a good opportunity to try out a few different pollen feeds. I brought 2 different ones this year. So we figure we'll make a half a batch of each, and I'll put one on one lot and one on the other lot, and then we'll have a review. Perhaps we could, I don't know, we'd give them a shout out, the one that works. Anyway, first of all, we need to mix some sugar. First part of getting organised to make your pollen patties to feed your ladies in their hive is you've got to get some sugar water. Now, you will have read several different options, as the same as me, around and around the mulberry bush. You go from 50 to 1 to bloody 60 to 2 to, fucking, what is it, 50 to 1, and what's the other one when you go 25 to 1, which is basically 2 kilos of sugar to 1 litre of water. Me, personally, I like to go at about 60% sugar to water. So then you've sort of got a little bit of preservative with the water and the sugar mix. If you go a 50-50 mix, the water can go off a bit easier, or the sugar will go off a bit easier. So if you're aiming for a 60-40 mix, kind of a bit round that figure, I've got 15 litres of water and I'm going to put in 20 kilos of sugar, and that should give you a little bit more of a preserving quality with sugar, because if you've ever made jam, you'll realise jam doesn't actually go off unless, well, I should tell a lie. My mum's jam used to go off sometimes, but she'd just cut the mould off the top and the underneath bit was all good. So I don't know whether you still get away with that in this day and age, but anyway, mum's jam was always good. My dad used to call it stacking jam because you could get it nice and thick and you could pile it on your toast. Good on you, mum. I did enjoy your jam. Honey to the bee, what about me? I don't know if I'm going to be able to carry that all in one big shift. Oh, no. Just so as you 20,000 viewers out there can't laugh at me, I'm going to do it in 2 trips. So there. Soft. I'm getting soft in my old age. Come over to my table and be stirred in. Never throw any shit away, because you never know when it's going to come in handy. This table has gone through many a life, and here it is in the shed. It's about to be utilised yet again. So when your wife asks, what's all that shit in your shed for? You can say, I don't know, but one day we'll find out. Now for a dissolving good time. Drum roll, please. After all this messing around, we might have to actually re-warm up the water. I had a mate, he's made up himself a jolly sugar dissolver. Just a cold water one with a pump. Goes, which is that a word? Save all the heating up business. So we might have to give that a try one day. Talking about sugar water and feeding bees and all that stuff that goes on. I was reading this article and people were actually asking this guy, or asking on the bee site, whether or not bees actually eat honey. Because there's all this controversy about the fact that you shouldn't feed honey to your bees. Now the point is you shouldn't go to the store and buy honey and feed it to your bees, because you never know where the hell that's come from. And you be a bit careful if you're feeding bees in the natural state with honey, because the bloody things get stuck in there and then they all drown, and that's no good to them either. But if you've got your little beehive in the backyard and you've kept a few frames of honey, and they're sort of looking like they've eaten through their stores, just put those frames back in there. It's fine, because that's what bees eat. That's the whole point of them getting honey in the first place. So I thought that was a bit concerning for me, people asking whether bees eat honey. I mean, if they didn't eat honey, they'd be pretty dopey for collecting the shit, wouldn't they? So the point of the exercise is, if you don't know where the honey comes from, definitely don't feed it in the open, and don't give it to your bees because they'll get a disease. But if it's your honey from your hive, it should be all good. Well, as long as you've done your checks and all the rest of it. And anyway, if it is your hive and your honey and you put it back in there and they're sick, well, they're all getting sick anyway, aren't they? So even then it's all good. Don't feed it in the open though, otherwise your neighbour's hives will get sick and then you'll be in the shit. Especially if they find out. Perhaps don't put a sign on the fence, bees being fed open honey in this room or in this backyard. Just avoid that idea altogether. But anyway, if it's your honey, your hive, all good. Just don't go to the shop and buy the crap, all right? I've got this crazy idea, because back when I was a blooming chef in the kitchens. You used to make these big batches of bread and scones and crap, and you just made a circle of flour on your bench, and you tip your liquid in the middle, and then you just stirred it all up and mixed it into a patty. I thought, well, shit, that ought to work for a patty idea. Right, so there you go. You just make yourself a little circle. Now, for all those of you that are following along at home, and you're going to ask, what's the actual measurements? The actual measurements are when it's wet enough. Not too wet and not too dry. I've got my fancy ass little pot. No expense spared here in the bush bee kitchen. So we've got our water, it's getting a bit cooler. Just going to put a dab of sugar water in the middle. Make yourself a little dam. You do that when you're making cement too. You ever made cement out on the ground and you get the cement and you get the cement and the gravel and the sand and you lay it around and you mix it with your shovel backwards and forwards a bit like this until you eventually make a big pile of wet. And then, surprisingly enough, it's called concrete when it's all put together. Just keep that in mind when you're talking about because you'll get talking to a builder person and they'll say, you're not cementing, you're concreting. So, keep your pronunciations correctly. Going to put our dry ingredients into our wet ingredients.
Now, I don't know whether you're allowed to do this or not, but I thought it'd be a good idea. We'll find out in a minute. Oh, yes, as a side note, I don't know whether you're meant to put oil in this jolly mixtures or not, because there's so many different options. But I'm going to slap a little bit in there, and if you feel so led to put some oil in your patties, go for it. If you do not want to put oil in your patties, just ignore this bit. So turn away if you don't want oil in your patty, all right? It's not quite the same consistency as bread flour. There we go. Anyway, we'll see if we can keep it all in the pot without making too much of a mess. Don't do this on your wife's kitchen bench. Unless you're a bachelor, and what the hell, you can do whatever the hell you like. You can do it on your kitchen table if it's your own table. You don't have to answer to anybody. Don't assume you'll have things tidied up before she gets home, because she's just as likely to have an early minute and catch you. I'm not sure what she'd say. I reckon this would be up there amongst things not to be done in the house. You reckon we need a little bit more moisture? Yes, is what we're going to make us a mess now, MJ. If you're a professional, you would have measured this and you wouldn't have this problem whether you run out of water. But, you know what? This is not necessarily professional. This is just what can happen in your backyard. I wonder what the Egyptians used to feed their bees when they had a bit of a trouble. This doesn't quite mix up as good as a scone mixture. But it looks a bit like scone mixture at the minute. It's a bit like when you don't rub your butter in properly. I'm not going to tell you that trick. Tell you what isn't bad though, if you haven't got any butter and you can't be stuffed doing that, if you just get yourself some cream and some lemonade and make the scones that way, they're not too bad anyway. So that's just a little chef hack, if you want to call it that. Don't know. I don't know. Anyway, we're not making scones, we're making patties. This is a bit involved. Oh, I think I've got it just a little bit damp. I'm going to ask my cameraman to put a little bit more flour on here for me. Blah. It's hard to tell. It soaks it up pretty good. I really don't think we're going to make 1,000 patties in this format. This is a bit crazy. But if you only had to make 10, you'd probably be right. Oh, gosh. You reckon that looks about right? I think I've got a mess. Oh, watch me cut myself. Maybe I'll use the blunt side of the knife to scrape it off instead of the serrated bit. Oh, rightio. Well, I think that's somewhere near the consistency we want. Now, got myself a little bit of baking paper. You can use wax paper if you really want to, but I don't know. I couldn't actually find any freezer paper or wax paper, so anyway, Glad Bakers is. Yes, well, I don't know, whatever brand it is where you are. This is the next part. You just want a decent handful. Really, pretty much. Glob it on your paper.
Now you can get all excited and get yourself a rolling pin and all that if you really want to get enthusiastic. Me, I'm a bit too bloody bush bee man for that. So you just put it over there and you just give it a bit of a flatten out. Because I'm sure the girls aren't going to care. And just fold it over, push it down, fold your ends in so you keep a bit of moisture out. And there you have it. Shaving a bee feed. I'm guessing if you were selling them, you'd have to measure them or weigh them or something. But since it's just for personal use, and you want to let them sit around for a little while, like overnight, just so they can consolidate a bit. Being that the day's run away with us anyway, we're not going to get the job done tonight anyway. So, way we're going to be here in the dark. Well, we've nearly got to 20, if we're lucky after this little bit. I am seriously thinking that we've stepped into the realms of we need some mechanical help. So I reckon we're going to go and see if we can't find ourselves a plaster mixer or something over at the hardware shop. Because otherwise, the lad will be heading home and this episode won't even be finished. Oh, how is it that everything transitioning from the next level, just more and more crap. It's ridiculous. Honestly. Well, I don't know. I was just thinking on the way over here, I'm going to try and get a paddle wheel, like when you make plaster, but I'm kind of thinking it might be a bit thicker than that. But at least we'll get half the job done and then we'll slap it on the table and finish it off. Kind of half changed my mind on the way here, but anyway. Let's go and see what we can find. There's your pigeon. Doesn't look like a plaster mixer to me, young John. Oh, come on.
What was that?
I was just thinking we could just get a bit of Rio rod and bend a hook on it. And we make our own dough hook. That might be a bit, see that little bit of that and just turn it into a hook. Blind I am. Oh, I don't know. What do you reckon? Now that might be a bit intense, you reckon? I don't think it's a high selling item, it's covered in dirt. I don't really know whether that'll work or not. I guess it'll get 3/4 of it mixed anyway. Nah, well, fuck it. We'll see what happens. Ah, shit. Guess we could just bend that bastard and make a dough hook, couldn't we? That's all that is really in the mixer, isn't it? Just a little U-hook. I think this might be a bit intense, but anyway. Oh well, we'll see. Oh golly, as the sun comes up, we start again. How does the time go on? If you're wondering, we haven't been out here all night stuffing around trying to make this thing work. The boss man said that we couldn't get the bloody lighting quite right, so here we are in the morning having another go. So part 2 of, no, is it part 2? It's not really, it's a continuation of part 1. But anyway, let's go and stir this crap up and see what happens. Ah, stop following me, honestly. I'm getting organised. How? Stop it. Oh, thank you. Tread on me cord just to add to my excitement. Now, somewhere in this lovely Clyde shed, there's a drill. I will find that in a minute. Ah, there she is. Putting away safely after the last project. Not. Yeah, what do we do with the stirring stick? I hope the blooming thing fits in my chuck here. Hopefully it's got a speed control, otherwise that's going to suck. Oh, hell. I don't even know if this thing's even going to work. So we'll find out. I'm not full of confidence. Don't tell me. What am I going to tell my mother if I have to go out and buy a bloody dough making machine? God, that'll be the next thing on eBay. It says applications: mortar, tile adhesive, filling compounds, plasters, screening. Yeah, doesn't mention anything about bee patties, so. But anyway, we'll see. Oh, tips. Luckily the bees haven't turned up to eat the sugar water. I reckon that'll be silly enough. Oh! Oh, it's a long way way down there. Let's see what sort of trouble we can get into. Shall we use the other bee formula just for fun? Crap, I'm just trying to work out how many we've got. I wanted to do half and half, one of one brand and one of the other. I might go inside and have a coffee while he does this. See how he gets on, shall I? You lot out there, just email my inbox and let me know how you got on, all right? No, you're protesting? Ah, okay, I'll give it a go then. God, it's hard to get good help. So I'm going to do this around here, I think. I think I'm going to stick my swizzy ass stick in here before I actually pour any powder in it. I wonder if that's... Is that fast or slow, that one? Is that two is quicker or slower? No, I don't know. Doesn't look much like a dough hook, does it? I wonder if is that speed or is that jolly impact? Whoa! Crap, I think that's faster that way. Hang on, we'll go this way. Make it slower. See what it does when we stick it in the bucket. It's making a whirlwind. I have a sneaking suspicion we're not going to get this out of this bucket afterwards. Stick a little bit of oil in it. I don't know, I would imagine there's a perfectionist part of oil, but we'll just put some in here and just for the hell of it. Be like my mum and just that extra dab of... When I make my mum a cup of coffee, and I always have to have a little jug of milk just there for her, because she's always put a little bit more milk in, regardless of how much milk's in there. She's just got to put a little bit more in, just a little dab, so just so she's been contributed to the coffee making. Now, Mr. deCaux, should mix the oil in a bit. It's going to be a disaster, isn't it? We'll just tip a bit of this in here. Try to get it in the bucket, that would be good. Ooh, that might work. Okay, so now we've got a bucket full of basically wet slurry, so now we're in all sorts of trouble. No, I don't know. We're about to where the plaster would be, so I don't know where we're going to go to from here. I'm pretty sure it's not a dough hook. Oh, nearly there. I don't know how. Oh, jet. Little by little we go. Little by little we go. If you're thinking of being a commercial beekeeper after all the lockdown craziness, but just consider the idea a little. It's more complicated than you ever believe. Bloody good fun having bees in your backyard, but when you get a few hundred of them, it gets confusing. Not sure how much more we're going to get away with. We might actually put that up on the table and just start spooning it out and just keep adding some dry mixture to it. I think it's pretty close to how we want it. That's a soft peak of whipped cream. I reckon that's about where we want it for this part of the project. I guess when you're beating egg whites, you just lift the blender up a little bit, so, or the mixer. Just stand back, otherwise you'll get it all over your boots. Oh, look at that. Oh, it's pretty good. Oh, now all we got to do is see if we can get it out of the bucket. Well, I reckon we can give it a bit of a try. We'll go both ways, because they would call that a sloppy, I reckon. A sloppy patty. Do you reckon we're going to have to go and steal a soup ladle off your dear wife? Can't see anyone in the immediate vicinity, so stealth mission. Be back. Remind me when we were in town, we better buy Mum a new one. And it better be better than the one I just stole. Hell. And it better be replaced before this episode comes out, I would thought. Right, what do you reckon? A scoop of that muck? I think I should have stolen a scraper as well. I'm not sure whether we get away with that or not, but it should be all right, shouldn't it? It's going to be firm enough that... Ugh, maybe not. Looks like something out of a nappy, doesn't it? That's not... Maybe that's not the go. I think we need it a little bit drier. We'll never get it out. I think we'll have a little bit of powder and we'll just dry it off a little bit more by hand, and then we'll wrap them up, I think. because that's a little bit too wet for me. Yeah, I think that'll work. Once it dries out a bit, because it's got to stay in this paper for a little while. So hopefully we'll be able to get this, slap it on top of our bees, and our bees will go, "Oh, look at that! We don't have to go out and find pollen from the pollen trees." The pollen trees. From the flowers. Well, you still want your bees to, if you're lucky, there'll still be a little bit of stuff for them to forage on, so they can breed up. You want a bit of natural pollen. It's a better option. And even when you're sugar feeding, if they can find a little bit of natural nectar, and then it's just a supplement rather than just a total replacement. Because of course sugar isn't a total replacement for honey. So neither is this a total replacement for natural pollen. It's all just meant to give them a helping hand. Because of course, in the wild, I think you have a beehive every, I don't know, 50, 40, probably every 10 Ks. You definitely don't have 50 beehives sitting in the same paddock all together. Changing the rules for them just a little bit, so we're going to give them a helping hand. No rest for the wicked. We've had to sneak out here because we've had to look at the weather map, and apparently it's going to shit tomorrow. So it's a nice balmy afternoon. Well, it's almost evening, but anyway. So we thought we'd put a few patties out. We've got two different varieties, so we're going to have a bit of a cross-reference. I'm not going to tell you which ones they are until later, because I'll keep you the mystery alive. Otherwise there'll be all sorts of trouble. Actually, before we sneak over to the boxes, we better go and light the smoker up. Hopefully I've got a piece of hessian with me. Perhaps I could just stick some of John's hair in there. What do you reckon? Nah, perhaps not. Here we go, here we go. Oh, we'll get a bit of a run on before it gets too cold. Don't do this on a cold, miserable day. That's why we're here today, because it's a nice warm afternoon. Don't do this when it's going to be blistering wind or something silly. Here in the Riverland, our winters aren't too crazy. But you don't want to do, and you don't want to be feeding your bees if they're in a cluster, like a really tight cluster, because they're not ready to be doing too much of any feeding then. So we're just going to try and fatten them up, get them a bit psyched up, so when they pop out of winter into spring, they're going to rocket out the gate and go, woo, here we go for a good year. Well, anyway, or at least they'll pollinate my almond trees. Okay, Coke, let's see what we've got, shall we? Pop the lid off here. A little bit of smoke under there. And they all had a bit of a roar then. Then we'll get one of our patties out the bag and see. Oh, look at that. It's even going to come off the paper. Oh, it's pretty cool. I don't know whether you're supposed to leave it on the paper or not, but we're going to just drop it in there like that. There you go, chicky babes. Have a bit of that. See what you think. You're like, hello, that's breakfast. Actually, it's dinner at the minute, really. The cameraman doesn't know yet, but he's going to have to help cook dinner tonight. Of course, if you've got a double box like this and you've still got your honey supers on, put your blooming patty above the brood chamber. Don't go sticking it right up the top, so the girls will have to run all that way up there. As a matter of fact, they'll probably ignore it if you put it that far up there. So you just make sure you put it on top of your brood chamber, and we'll hopefully they eat them. We'll find out together. Let's just stick that there like that, shall we? See if you can find it. Open feeding is of course a lot easier than this, but then you don't get it precisely to each hive, so it's getting a bit cooler and a bit damper, so you don't want your pollen substitute out in the open too much getting blooming wet. Otherwise the ladies can't get it in their hive. So anyway, we'll shuck some in here and see what they do. yeah, as usual, here in the bee yard, everything takes a bit longer than you think it's going to. But anyway, it's a lovely balmy evening, and we've got them all padded up, so we'll come back in a day or two and see how we got on. A couple of these ones I had a poke around in a little bit, and they're already starting to go for it, so hopefully that fattens them up.